gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Bernie Sanders and AOC did a rally in Las Vegas on the 20th, Thursday the 20th. And Hasan Piker did a quick interview with them before they went on. Then they went on in front of a huge crowd, yet another overflow crowd on this Bernie Sanders tour. And I think AOC helped to bring out some of those numbers as well. Bernie Sanders, this rally in an off year from an election, outperformed his rally that he held at the same venue when he was running for president in 2015, I believe it was. By a few thousand, there are more people in attendance this time. And like I said, I think that might be partially because of AOC, just adds a little bit of extra excitement. But the moral of the story is that Bernie Sanders' ability to draw and command a crowd is still there, and it is emerging as one of the essential talents that exists in the resistance to the Trump administration and regime. So Bernie Sanders' tour is called Fight Oligarchy. That's the message that he is pushing out there to as many people as possible. And some people said oligarchy, can't use a big scary word like that. But Bernie decided to trust his audience, that there are enough people out there that are smart enough to know what this means. And he was right, and people are getting behind it. And so you see an interesting dynamic shift happening when it comes to left of center politics, anything that exists in opposition to Trump, where just like they did anytime Bernie Sanders was running for president, people are coalescing around his message. And his message is the same as it was in both primary runs that he did, which is that the rich are too powerful. They have too much money. They have too much control over every aspect of our lives. Meanwhile, the average person in America is living unhealthy. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Life expectancy is getting worse. Quality of life is not where it should be. People are struggling. People are stressed, which is contributing to poor health in a incredibly rich, incredibly developed nation that has one of the worst healthcare systems in the world in terms of developed nations. So that's his message, and he is pushing it now, just like he did in 2020, just like he did in 2016, and it's resonating in the same way. And it's interesting this time because this isn't in direct opposition to the Democratic Party, although it could be at some point when you look at what's going on with Chuck Schumer and his failure to use any type of leverage in the Senate. The power that Bernie Sanders and AOC are starting to build when it comes to actual people power, going directly to the people and getting them excited and engaged about these issues, they are the ones who have that ability right now, and the Democrats at large do not. There is nobody in the Democratic Party who is doing anything even close to that. And the contrast between the substance of this message that AOC and Bernie Sanders are delivering and the message that we get from middle Democrats, corporate Democrats, whatever you want to call them, essentially people who oppose or are sheepish about the type of agenda that Bernie Sanders espouses, they're essentially do nothing. They're either Senate or Congress creatures that, are able to operate in that environment, but are not able to get out of that environment and get people engaged. And by the way, these are two people, elected officials, who are going all around the country to places that they don't represent. and people are showing up in those places. Obviously, if AOC did an event in New York, it would have a huge turnout, and she has. But the fact that they can go to other places, and AOC is planning to do these town halls in Republican districts, all of this is very good strategy. And I think right now what they need to focus on is building momentum, because while there is urgency, the only way any of this energy is going to be able to go anywhere is if it builds and mounts and mounts and mounts. But the question is, back to what I was saying about, the halls of power and what Democrats in general are going to do. And that's what I want to highlight about this Hasan Piker interview. He didn't have long to interview them. It was not a tough interview. He didn't come out the gate hot or anything, putting them on the hot seat. That was not the point of this. I don't think he got to ask as much as he wanted to ask, but he got them to give brief little sound bites. And I think the content of their speeches at this rally was more pertinent than what came out in this interview. But I do want to highlight this interview that Hasan did, because I think he's doing a better job of getting himself out there. I mean, this is a streamer. This dude's making millions of dollars. He does not have to leave his house ever. So he is putting in a lot of effort to go to places where he can talk to Bernie Sanders, talk to the firefighters from LA who were conscripted from the prisons. Doing interviews like that is, I think, also putting Hasan in a more visible position in terms of the left and the opposition. And, it's making him a more prominent figure. And so I'm interested in that. So I'll play some clips from this interview real quick, and then we'll get back to that.
The Trump administration is now trying to put up an academic receivership and take charge and take control over different institutions within Colombia. And I feel like this is a grave mistake. Do you feel like the Democrats have any sort of interest in fighting back against this? Not even, regardless of what their opinion might be on Israel, the fact is that this is greatly going to expand, and it's simply just the entry point. Like, the Palestine conversation is simply an entry point that has at least like some semblance of institutional backing, but it's obvious to me that they're going to go after a lot of other people, including but not limited to the French researcher, according to Le Monde, that was denied entry into the country because they looked through his phone and they found out that he had criticized Trump's elimination of grants.
I think there actually is support for it because of the free speech grounds on it. Because of the free speech grounds, because when ICE came to try to pick up in Mahmoud Khalil's case, when they tried to pick him up, they offered no warrant. These were unmarked people. There were no charges. And so you have Senator Durbin and Senate Judiciary, right, Bernie? I think
he is the ranking member of the Judiciary.
I believe they released a statement talking about how they want to move on this. But I also think that it goes without saying that there is still profound money and interest that remains dedicated on both sides of the aisle in trying to marginalize and also conflate criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism. Right. And we have to be very aware of that too.
I believe I'm paraphrasing here. You said something along the lines of like running as an independent rather than utilizing the party.
For me, that's not a very radical concept, because I am the longest serving independent in American congressional history, and I've always run as an independent. Look, I think the Democrats over the years deserve credit for the work they've done on women's rights, on gay rights, on civil rights in general, fighting bigotry. They deserve credit, and they've made progress. But I don't think anybody with a straight face can tell you that they've stood up for the working class of this country. And I think that's why so many working class people have drifted into the Republican Party, not because they believe in tax breaks for billionaires or they don't believe that climate change is real. It's they look at the Democrats and there's not much there. So what my view is people should think about running as they want. Progressive independents should run as progressive Democrats, but don't necessarily feel that you have to run within the Democratic Party. And I think as you may recall, in Nebraska, a fellow named Dan Osborne ran a really, really powerful campaign as an independent, running as a very proud trade unionist, running on economic issues, and he did extremely well, much better than anyone had anticipated. So that was my point, and I think it makes sense.
Do you feel like there's any sort of momentum to break through the duopoly in this structure as someone who has run as an independent? And
it is.
A long career?
It's a long discussion. If you're asking me, do I think we could start a third party tomorrow? I don't, for a lot of reasons, having to do with restrictions in various states making it almost impossible. But I think what you're saying is massive discontent with both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. More and more people are looking for, I think, independent alternatives.
So the two things that I really wanted to highlight here is AOC saying that she feels that there is support for opposition within the Democratic Party to this case of Mahmoud Khalil being disappeared by ICE and other cases like that, which are only going to increase in frequency, and they are as we speak. And she said that she does feel that there is a desire within the Democratic Party to oppose that type of policy, that's not something that they necessarily are wanting to just roll over on. Now, I think that's an overly optimistic perspective. Democrats are not putting themselves in a position to not roll over on anything. So, the idea that somehow they have some appetite to oppose the disappearing of Mahmoud Khalil in a way that's going to build real momentum, I think that's too generous. I think maybe if she had more time to articulate herself, maybe the picture wouldn't have been as rosy. So I can understand why she would say that, because I'm sure there are Democrats who recognize behind closed doors or have said things in regard to how atrocious of a violation of all of our rights it is to do what they did to Mahmoud Khalil. But, the idea that they're going to do anything about it, or that is going to be a meaningful point of rebellion on the part of Democrats, I think is kind of dead on arrival, because this is the issue of Palestine. And that was the point that Hasan was making, is that, is there any hope that the Democratic Party is going to do anything about this, given that it is connected to one of the core issues that controls the party? And I think that question kind of answers itself. And so really the answer is that people like Bernie and AOC, who are building an enormous voice outside of the Democratic Party, need to be the ones who are speaking up about Mahmoud Khalil. And there's others too, anybody that can speak up should. But, the idea that we can depend on the Democratic Party to mount meaningful opposition when Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are in control, again, it's just dead on arrival. And even AOC, her voting record when it comes to the sort of symbolic and sometimes not so symbolic gestures of Congress towards, defining criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism or expanding the definition of anti-Semitism to have a chilling effect on free speech. Even the compromises that AOC has made when it comes to that, for whatever reason, do not reflect great on what the Democratic Party is going to do on that particular issue. But obviously, that is going to become a precedent that is expanded. And so the continued speaking out about Mahmoud Khalil and anybody else who is treated in that same fashion is going to be an essential part of the resistance. And anybody, whether it's Democrats, AOC, Bernie Sanders, who doesn't recognize that is ultimately going to fail a lot of people, regardless of the momentum that is built. If people that are being disappeared and stripped of their rights in front of everybody are going to be forgotten by these leaders that we have now emerging, it's just we're cooked, essentially. So it's good on Hasan for bringing this up. And the other thing that Bernie Sanders said is that he called attention to his status as an independent and the fact that he's been an independent in the Senate for longer than anybody. and that's an essential part of his career as a politician. And that's true, and we forget about that a little bit because Bernie caucuses with the Democrats, and he ran as a Democrat. He wanted to reform the Democratic Party, even up through Joe Biden's term. He was not challenging the Democrats, not in an overt way. So what he's saying is that people should consider running as independents, independently from the Democratic Party. And his strategy seems to be that if more independents can get elected, then more outside pressure can be placed on the Democratic Party. I think that that's probably true. The problem is, how do you get those independents elected? And I would assume that that is what Bernie Sanders is going to aim this project of his, for as long as he can sustain it, towards, which is, electing as many independents into office as possible so that that bulwark can exist. Now, the problem with that is that if people are independent, you could believe fucking anything. And while we would like to believe that everybody in America is in this sort of middle ground where they don't really like Democrats and Republicans, but they mostly believe the same things, that's not true. The melting pot of America has turned into a hodgepodge of nightmarish ideas mixed with common sense ideas that almost every person has some kind of mixture of, especially people who are not closely engaged with politics and are not closely examining their own political beliefs, which all of us, anybody who's listening to this, even if you disagree with every single thing that I said or ever say, you're a person who examines your own political beliefs, at least to an extent, at least enough to label yourself or to understand where you fit in the picture. But a lot of people who are, middle independent Americans, non-affiliated Americans, there's no way, I don't know exactly what the strategy is to not just elect independents to office, but do so in a way that has a coherent ideological clarity that can actually get things done. I think that would be kind of the next problem that you would have if you just elected a bunch of independents in various districts, is these people some of them are going to go where the wind blows, maybe even worse than Democrats like John Fetterman do. So maybe that's defeatist of me. I still think it's a good idea to try to get independents elected, but I think there does have to be a very concerted strategy to, push the right independents, not just any old independents. But I'm sure Bernie Sanders is smart enough to factor that in. And the truth is, we have to temper our expectations here. They're doing a very good job of drawing these crowds, getting some excitement going, and making people feel like there is some resistance happening. But even with this, even with these crowds, even with the excitement, there is no actual resistance here yet. The actual resistant tactics still need to happen. And that is kind of the issue here when it comes to Bernie and AOC, even though I fully support what they're doing. And, even disattached from any election, I would volunteer to help this effort, especially as it builds momentum, and I would encourage others to do the same. However, the problem is that are they going to be able to attach this movement to the type of tactics and direct action that is going to be necessary to stop the Trump administration? That's what we really have to consider here, because they're building a lot of momentum here, and that's excellent. But are they going to be able to spearhead the type of movement that is going to stop fascism or really oppose fascism? There's potential for it, but they are going to have to risk their asses about 1,001 times in order to do it. And we'll see. There was another Democrat who stood on stage recently, called for a general strike to an enormous amount of applause. You also have Tim Walz going out there doing the same thing he was doing on the campaign trail and doing it well. So the fact that these guys are doing this now is really good. And the point is that they have to keep doing it. And they have to keep doing whatever it takes to keep this momentum going. Because the vision that Bernie Sanders always had was that if you can build enough momentum behind an issue like Medicare for All, which I still think needs to be the main focus, if you build momentum and people power behind that, then the system inevitably has to bend to it. And to an extent, it kind of doesn't matter what elected officials are doing. if you can get the people organized and moving enough that they start to take control of the situation in the way that we have the power to do, then it doesn't matter who's in charge. And that's why I think it is important, while we can focus on these like independent strategies, primarying certain Democrats, maybe even Chuck Schumer, trying to knock Republicans out of office. Okay, that's great. But we also got to think a little bit bigger and think in terms of, you know, if enough momentum, if we can seize on some of this momentum that we are seeing from Republicans in Republican town halls, these people are identifying that Republicans are lying to them. When Elon is going in with Doge and he's going and cutting all this fraud and waste, it's a lie. And these Republicans are standing up. These are real Republicans, not actors and not leftists. They're standing up in these town halls and they're saying, where is the fraud? Where is the waste? So these are people that understand that government spending is not inherently a bad thing, and that the problem is that it's not being spent in a way that improves Americans' lives. So, in the frustration, in the wake of frustration that is inevitable to come from this Trump administration, especially if he wrecks the economy, that anger can be channeled towards a transformative policy like Medicare for all. And I think if we're going to see these Democrats out there starting to, you know, try to push people in the right direction and coalesce this message, great to see Bernie and AOC doing an event together. I want to see them do an event with Tim Walz as well. I want to see them team up as much as possible, especially if the message discipline can be maintained around Medicare for all and redistributive policies. Because the point of the matter is, if we can get enough of the electorate whipped up and excited about those ideas, we can force any politicians to get it done, including Trump and the Republicans. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting all kinds of cool content there, like beats, exclusive podcasts, movie reviews, book reviews. If you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts, all of that's going to be posted there and more. If you have ideas for stuff that you would like to see as exclusive content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.